The Spook Hunters were a white racist youth gang of Southgate, California, active from the 1940s to the 1950s. The gang was founded as a reaction to the growing African American population in the neighboring city of Los Angeles. The group's goal centered on work against integration and for racial segregation in communities. To reach these goals, they started fights with and intimidated black youths. In response to these white racist gangs, the black youths formed their own gangs to protect themselves and their neighborhoods. The SLAUSONS, the Businessmen, and the Gladiators were all formed as a direct reaction to attacks from the white gangs like the Spook Hunters. Here are some clips from past interviews of people discussing the Spook Hunters. One of the things I've always been interested in is the story about the Spook Hunters and the city of Southgate and, you know, that whole situation that was going on there. Can you give us a little rundown of the Spook Hunters and Southgate?
I can give you very little rundown about the Spook Hunters. We moved in the Florence Firestone Watts area in 1963, and there was only a handful of Spook Hunters that we believed. They wasn't as active in 63, but what was active in 63 was the Southgate Police Department. And we often believe that they were under the title of the Spook Hunters. If we crossed into Southgate from Watts, we're slammed against the cars, we go back home, you can get kicked, legs kicked apart. We're talking about guys 8 years old, 10 years old. Now, we did have one encounter with some white guys that was much bigger than us, and they were throwing rocks at us as me and Bobby walked down Alameda Street. It's a pretty large intersection right there. And I can't say that they were Spook Hunters or just some older kids wanting to throw some rocks at some younger kids. So that's pretty much the Spook Hunters. They had Southgate, Compton, Linwood. They were huge. And by the time we got there, our neighbors had warned us about them. But and we know that they used to come into the Watts area and throw fire bombs and stuff like that at the people. And when the people go to retaliate, there's that Southgate Police Department on the black guy. So that we had been told about. So I never personally encountered any Spook Hunters unless those Southgate Police was Spook Hunters, because I sure encountered them.
Gotcha. And I know everybody listening who's from LA, they hear Southgate and they're like, you know, that's predominantly Latino. I mean, we're talking late 60s, early 70s. It was all white. Compton was all white. Linwood was all white. You know, pretty much, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I actually went to Southgate Middle School for a minute. And about that time, it had changed. It was probably 50% Hispanic, 10% blacks, and the rest was white.
Gotcha. And when you moved to Southgate during that time, you had a friend from Elm Street Watts, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't move to Southgate.
Oh, you just went to school there.
I was a traveling person trying to find myself, so to speak. I was getting kicked out of all these different schools, so I had to go to continuation, which meant I couldn't go with the main population of the school. I had to go in some bungalow buildings. And a lot of my elementary schools were from Elm Street Watts, the Hispanic gang. And they were all a whole bunch of them. They were all at Southgate High School.
I would love to know if any of your older homies or even, you know, just older people that you knew at the time ever told you any stories about the Spook Hunters?
Yes. The Spook Hunters were over in Downey.
Southgate,
Because
right?
I was actually, Southgate and Huntington Park. Because I was actually, when my parents first moved to Compton, right, we was the third or second black family on a street called Springs. So we were more closer to Linwood at this time. So at that time, at certain times, even in the 60s, we couldn't go swimming at the Linwood plunge swimming pool at Linwood Park over there because we were black. Okay, and at certain times if you were black, you couldn't be caught over at that time. That was even during my generation.
Damn, you look young as hell, man. I'm
62.
Oh man, keep doing what you're doing, dog. I thought you were a lot younger.
No, I'm 62.
Okay.
So I was born in 1959.
Okay.
So these groups were still like bits and pieces of it still left even during my time. Where what happens was the spook hunters would come. This is from now. I'm speaking outside of my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The spook hunters would come from Linwood or Southgate, Downey, Huntington Park, come over the train tracks, which was divided those areas from South Central, what we know as South Central now, but Watts and East Compton, right? And they would come over the tracks. It was the Alameda tracks, right? Which we know as the Alameda corridor at this time. And they would come over and attack black people in their communities. And then they would run back over to their communities. And the police would protect them. But if the police caught you over there in their communities, oh man, they jump on you, man. They be on you. You wouldn't even get close enough to them dudes to be effective. But when they came to your communities, it was like they was allowing, the police was engaging and indulging in their actions. Yeah. And so the racism was really still strong because, like I say, man, 68, 69, I couldn't go swimming in Linwood just because, because I think at that time we played like a dime or a quarter to go swimming, but they had a specific day for black people to go swimming.
That's crazy, man.
And then at that time, Linwood had the all-white police cars, representing the all-white police department. There was no sheriff. There was a Linwood police department. They drove all-white cars. And at times, they would catch you up there by Sears and Roebuck, and there used to be a Sad Sack on the corner. There was Sad Sack, which was kind of like a sports store, and then there was Sears and Roebuck, and then there was CVS, J.J. Newberry's, Daniels, Market Basket, and a couple of other different stores, Tom McCann, Gallon Camp, all those stores are right there.
That there was a street that your dad would not go down because he would get pulled over by police almost every time. What street was that?
Imperial Highway, baby.
Oh, damn. Talk to me about that street and what happened, like why he would avoid that.
Back in the day, Firestone Sheriff patrolled everything around my area, from my house all the way to, I think, even Linwood, all that. Firestone was a station. Most of LA, if it wasn't LAPD, it was Firestone. And Firestone was known for putting the boot in the motherfucker's ass, okay? They were known for putting boots on people's ass, especially black folks. And my dad's friend had bought a brand new Ford Galaxy 500 convertible. He worked at the Goodyear plant on Central in Florence, and he worked the graveyard shift. And they caught him, they pulled him over because he had a new car, pulled him out the car and beat him because he had a new car. Okay, beat him because he had a new car. And my dad saw that. My daddy just bought a Cadillac. It was a '64 Cadillac. It wasn't brand new. It was, it was relatively new at that time. And he just made a point every time he had to go down to Sears or anything, and because there was no 105 back then. There was no 405. Imperial Highway, it was a highway, literally. It was the highway go across town on. We would take Imperial Highway in Artesia to Disneyland sometime. And anytime we had to go down on Imperial Highway, mom man made sure he had the kids in the car. He felt he can get a pass if he wasn't driving crazy and they saw kids in the car. And I can recall him ever having a situation that didn't work for. But yeah, my old man would not drive down Imperial Highway without kids in the car.
Wow, dude. We've briefly mentioned this group before, but can you tell us anything about the Spook Hunters?
Oh man, I heard a lot about the Spook Hunters as I was coming up. My cousin, a little older than me, he ran with the SLAUSONS. And the Spook Hunters were a group of a white gang that I think they were in either LA or Linwood. I'm not sure.
Southgate, Downey.
Okay, yeah.
Downey, Southgate area, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't tolerate no black folks in the neighborhood. And the black brothers got together, started forming their gangs, the businessmen and SLAUSONS to fight these guys. These guys were aggressive. They would come to your hood, whoop your ass. You didn't have to go to them. They whoop your ass. Okay, if they saw you, they would ride down the street just like the Klan would, come looking for problems. Okay, and brothers had to band together and to defend their neighborhoods. And that's how you got the SLAUSON, the businessmen, and some other gangs I can't think of right now. But the spook hunters were some of the main guys. This is their name, the spook hunters. That means they going looking for problems. Okay.
Because spook was a derogatory term for black people.
That was like nigga back then. If you was a spook, that was just like, that was just like another name. Picking all the derogatory names. Spook was one of them right there that they use it here on the West Coast.
A great part of the South Central was white, Inglewood was white, Gardena was white.
First black kid to move into that area moved on 62nd and Hooper in 1946. There were Italians, there were Germans, there were Russians, Armenians, Lithuanians, what they call Croatians and Serbs. When you can't live where you want to live, when you can't go where you want to go without someone saying something to you, there's a problem. And every day I was called names with no brothers and sisters, so I began with a bad attitude. And I began fighting the little white kids every day.
And you can track literally week by week attacks on black kids in the high schools and in junior high schools. And what you see emerging are black youth fighting back against attacks by white gangs and beginning to create, what they didn't call gangs at the time. They were just groups of kids united to fight off, the people who stoned them when they came to school or ambushed them after school.
The whites were predominant in the area, so we banded together at SLAUSON Park.
There were well-organized white gangs, some of which then continued and lived on for 20 more years, like the infamous Spook Hunters.
We used to get attacked by white boys, namely a group called Spook Hunters, who were all over Inglewood, Southgate, Linwood, Hollywood, Maywood, and all the other woods.
Yeah, they had a gang called the Spook Hunters. Yeah. We shut them down. They had a black man hanging on the back of their jacket with a rope.
Spook Hunters was an umbrella term. That was a term like, black people are spooks or whatever, and we're white boys, and we're going to catch them.
What exactly happened?
Well, the white boys in them 41 Fords cut down, would ride by and call you all nigger, this, that, and another. And we fought with them.
Once I learned about these white gangs, I learned about the response to these white gangs. A gang called the SLAUSONs, a gang called the Farmers, the Businessmen, a gang called the Gladiators. These were all black gangs. And I learned about these famous gang members back then.
I started to hear about Bird and about Chinaman, and then these are SLAUSONs, and it dawned on me, and me and my buddies on the block, we're in the SLAUSON area, so it's starting at the end of grammar school. We said, well, we're going to be SLAUSONs. We are from the South, so when we come to the city, we was confused about prejudice.
Racism and prejudice was the order of the day. It happened every day.
We couldn't go there. We couldn't go here. We couldn't go that. So I call us, we're not gangs. We are the pioneers that open up Los Angeles where that we can be in Centinela Park. Or we could be across Crenshaw.
And Gardena, these existing gangs, the SLAUSONs, the Gladiators, the Businessmen, who kind of like fought the white boys throughout the city. Then there's no white boys to fight.
Jesse Owens Park used to be called Sportsman's Park. From 61 to 63, we fought the white cats from Inglewood because they said that blacks couldn't come swimming in the swimming pool. So eventually we got the park. Eventually the name changed, not because we were the toughest or the baddest, but because after, during those 60s, it was the white flight